A 17-year-old called Logan MacPhail has been sentenced to 17 years for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Holly Newton, who was 15, who was stabbed to death in January of 2023. Logan MacPhail will serve a minimum term of 17 years for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Holly Newton, after stabbing her to death in January of 2023. Newcastle Crown Court has just been told this sentence. The judge has read out the sentences. Mr. Justice Hilliard has given that sentence of 17 years, a minimum term for Logan MacPhail, who was 17 himself, for murdering his ex-girlfriend. Now, Sky News has spoken to the family of Holly Newton. Let's just play you now what Holly Newton's family have had to say to us. She was 15 when stabbed to death in January of 2023.
Holly would have helped anyone. She was very strong about what she believed in. She just always wanted to make people happy. She never wanted to upset people.
What sort of impact has the past, 18 months, nearly 2 years now had on your family?
A huge impact. It's not only impacted us, but it's the wider family, but especially Holly's siblings. Sometimes they don't want to talk about it, and other times they do want to ask questions, and yeah, and obviously they do miss her lots. And I think for them it's because, well, nobody knows what there is after. So, yeah, they hope to see her again one day. Yeah, totally changed the dynamics of our family and the wider family, definitely. It's more of a broken family now.
As soon as I heard the words guilty, it was like a massive weight had been lifted on my shoulders. It felt lighter than ever. And that night was probably the first decent night's sleep I've had since the 27th of January.
There was a sense of relief. Obviously, we wanted a guilty verdict. But regardless, it doesn't bring Holly back. I don't know, it's not normal life. You go back to it's a different life. You've got kind of the life before Holly died and the life after Holly's died. So it's never normal. But it's more about getting into a routine, especially for the other children. You have to just get on with things for them.
It's creating a new life, not living the life what you were before Holly died. It's making all the little adjustments just so you can carry on.
He was obsessed with her. For a long time, he was obsessed with her, but I don't think we quite knew how obsessed until his behaviour changed. He definitely felt that if he couldn't have her, then nobody could. Yeah, and he said that too at one point, because she told me, and I'd said, well, loads of people say that though, so you just have to say okay then and kind of let it go. But what we didn't know is he meant it. I don't think he can I don't think he can be in society and be safe around people. I mean, he's carried that knife around a busy town centre with families and young children, hiding in woodland and everything. It's just not normal behaviour.
You had to watch sort of Holly on CCTV throughout the trial.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been pretty difficult to see those final moments.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very upsetting. But also, it's, like I've always said, it's like watching a horror movie and you know the ending. You can't change it. I think they need to realise that under 16s can be subject to this sort of behaviour, and something needs to change there with it's it's a very grey area between 16 and 18, and that needs to change, of whether you're a child or an adult between 16 and 18, because nobody seems to know. And I think younger people need access to domestic abuse services if they feel they need it, or at least can ask for that support so they can receive some sort of counselling to try and help them.
Well, the words there of Michaela Trussler, mother of Holly Newton, who was 15 when stabbed to death by Logan MacPhail in Hexham in January of 2023. MacPhail has now been sentenced to a minimum of 17 years in prison for Holly's murder. Let's bring in our North of England correspondent Fraser Maud for more on this. Fraser, look, we hear there the pain of Holly Newton's parents. Just take us inside the courtroom when sentencing was read out.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, isn't it, hearing Holly's parents speak about those terrible events of January 2023. Logan MacPhail, 17 years old now, was 16 at the time of the attack, was in court today. He wasn't in court yesterday to hear the first part of this two-day sentencing hearing. He appeared via video link. He has special educational needs, learning difficulties, and has been diagnosed with mild autism, which has meant that several stages during the entirety of first the trial and now the sentencing, the court has to take regular breaks to accommodate his potential anxiety issues. He was in court today wearing a suit and tie, gave very little reaction to what was happening apart from shaking his head occasionally as the judge went through his sentencing remarks. As I say, he was 16 at the time of this attack. He'd followed Holly into Hexham and was following her at a distance, trying to disguise his identity by wearing a hood and hanging back some distance from Holly and a group of her friends who were in town shopping that day. Eventually, he did approach her after about 45 minutes of following at a distance, and that was when the appalling attack took place. 36 knife wounds were received by Holly during an attack which lasted around 60 seconds or so, and during which bystanders were heard Holly crying out for him to stop. A friend of hers tried to intervene. He was attacked himself. The court heard a victim impact statement from him today explaining what this has meant to him, how it's affected his education, how it's affected his confidence, how he still has nightmares and still has limited movement in one of his shoulders following that attack. MacPhail was also found guilty of attempted murder on that young boy. Last month, of course, reporting restrictions were lifted to allow us to name Logan MacPhail. We know that the pair had been in a relationship for 18 months after meeting at Army Cadets, but Logan MacPhail could not cope with the fact that that relationship had ended. Holly was pronounced dead shortly after the attack at hospital. MacPhail was arrested at the scene. Police have released footage of him being arrested. At the time when he was arrested, he said that he never intended to carry out the attack. He later claimed that he blacked out and that he was only carrying the knife which was used in the attack in order to harm himself. But that knife, such was the brutality of the attack, actually broke during the murder and was also bent. The blade was also bent of the knife, something that the judge also alluded to. In court today, the judge in his sentencing made praise of Holly's family for appearing in court, for the victim impact statements that they made, and for honouring Holly by appearing in court. He went on to say that the day Holly died, their lives changed forever. Holly's life was beyond measure and told MacPhail, "What you have done cannot be undone." He said that the motivation for the murder was resentment. He said that in terms of sentencing, he had to remember Logan's age and his welfare, but he said that Holly was a child. You weren't yet an adult, but she was no match for you, armed with a knife. She must have realised, he said, that before she died, she was fighting for her life. He said that Logan deliberately understated his understanding of how the trial procedure works in order to avoid standing trial. He said that he does have a speech impediment and an autism diagnosis, but the judge said that that was at the mild end of the spectrum, and that what he did went so very far beyond bad judgment and limited understanding. The judge accepted that MacPhail had difficulties in his upbringing, that he was on the child protection plan. Social services had been involved previously. He'd been found in the past near to a bridge, near to a railway line, and had attempted to take an overdose. The judge acknowledged that he had expressed remorse for the killing of Holly, but he said, how far can that go? When you killed Holly, your first reaction was to say that she had been horrible to you, in effect trying to victim blame. He said that you made the decision to stab a 15-year-old girl to death, or because your relationship had ended and you were jealous. What happened, he said, should not happen to any child or parents. The sentencing concluded with the sentence being passed down of a life term, with Logan MacPhail ordered to serve a minimum of 17 years before he's eligible for parole for the murder of young Holly.
OK, Fraser Moore there at Newcastle Crown Court. Now, the police and Crown Prosecution Service have also commented on this case. Detective Sergeant Darren Davies was the officer in charge of the investigation, and Lindsay Collin is from the CPS North East.
It's impossible to describe just how tragic it is. It's the death of a 15-year-old schoolgirl in a quiet Northumberland town, with the offender being her ex-boyfriend, who was 16 at the time. There was a 16-year-old boy also seriously injured during the incident, which came about following the breakup of Holly's relationship with MacPhail. And she was just out on a Friday after school, just wandering around with the boy, and one of her friends was going to get a pizza before she went home. What she didn't know is that her ex-boyfriend was in the town following her, and had been for nearly an hour.
And how impactful is this for the community of Hexham?
It's been huge for Hexham. It's a popular town, but it's quite a quiet town. It's quite close-knit. It's been mentioned numerous times by people who've spoken to police during the investigation that it was named the happiest place to live. The residents are very proud of the town, so for something like this to happen came as quite a shock to them, and it did really hit them, but the response from the town was, as you would expect, it was brilliant. The witnesses all remained at scene, they helped, they were incredibly brave and nothing but supportive to the police and to the family.
And how shocking is this as an investigation to work on, where a 16-year-old stabs a 15-year-old girl to death? Fortunately,
we don't get many of them. Obviously, it does happen, and it happens far more often than it should. But for someone who's got a child of a similar age, it is shocking to know what's going on, and especially for it to be in a relationship situation. Shocking for everyone involved, even for police who see all sorts of nastiness day to day. It's still one that shocks you, and certainly won't be one that leaves us anytime soon.
So, in your words, it's one to remember then, working on this investigation?
Yeah, it won't be one I forget. The murder of a 15-year-old girl, it'll stay with us.
And just how shocking were the injuries that Holly had? They were very violent.
It was the sheer number. It was 36 uses of the knife within a very short space of time, less than a minute. Of such severity that at some point during the attack the knife broke, whether that was on Holly or the floor. That takes a lot to snap a knife, and to still continue causing injuries with what was left of the knife, which is why some of the injuries were more shallow, and ultimately, despite CPR from a former nurse, then police officer, then paramedics, and then the RVI in Newcastle, which is a trauma centre, to be unable to save her just shows the severity of that attack.